The house always felt too big at night. It wasn't just the sheer size. Marble floors stretching into dim hallways, chandeliers that never quite lost their glow, but the emptiness that settled between the walls. Lena was used to it. Her mother was rarely home before midnight, often away on business trips or locked in her office, too engrossed in work to notice much else. That left her with David. Her stepfather had been part of her life for 6 years now, a permanent fixture in their cold but luxurious home. He was the kind of man people gravitated toward, self-assured, intelligent, with a presence that made silence feel intentional rather than empty. He wasn't overly affectionate, nor was he distant. He existed in the space between, never overstepping, never lingering too long. Until recently, Lena had started noticing things she shouldn't. The way his voice softened when speaking to her, how his eyes lingered a second too long when she walked into a room. It was subtle, nothing definitive, but enough to make her stomach tighten with something dangerously close to curiosity. Tonight, the house was particularly quiet. A storm rattled against the windows, the wind howling through the gaps in the old estate. Lena sat cross-legged on her bed, a book open in her lap, though she hadn't turned the page in over 20 minutes. Her mind was elsewhere, on the argument she had overheard earlier. David and her mother. It had started in hushed voices in the downstairs study, but as tensions rose, so did the volume. Accusations of neglect, of indifference. A marriage unraveling thread by thread. It wasn't the first time. A sharp knock on her door pulled her from her thoughts. She barely had time to react before it creaked open, revealing David standing in the doorway. He was dressed casually, sweatpants, a fitted t-shirt that clung to his toned frame, but there was something off about his posture, something restless in his eyes. Asterisk, you're still awake? Asterisk, his voice was quieter than usual, as if he wasn't sure he should be here. Lena swallowed, nodding. Asterisk, yeah. Couldn't sleep? Asterisk. He hesitated before stepping inside, closing the door partway behind him. It wasn't unusual for him to check on her, but there was something different about tonight. He looked tired, or maybe just worn down. I didn't mean to wake you, he said, rubbing a hand across his jaw. Asterisk, I just needed a second to clear my head. Asterisk. Lena nodded slowly, watching as he moved toward her bookshelf, his fingers tracing the spines of books he likely had no intention of reading. The room felt smaller with him in it. Warmer. You and Mom were fighting again, she said before she could stop herself. David let out a quiet breath, his fingers pausing on a random title. Asterisk, yeah. We were. Asterisk, he glanced at her then, something unreadable flickering behind his eyes. Asterisk, it's complicated. Asterisk. Lena knew that was the kind of answer adults gave when they didn't want to explain things. But she also knew it was the truth. Asterisk, you okay? Asterisk, she asked softly. David let out a low chuckle, shaking his head. Asterisk, that's usually my line. Asterisk. He turned then, leaning against the bookshelf, arms crossed over his chest. His gaze settled on her, more focused now, as if he were seeing her for the first time in a long while. You've grown up a lot, you know, he murmured. Heat pricked at the back of Lena's neck. It was a simple statement, but the way he said it made her pulse quicken. She forced a smile, shrugging. Asterisk, that tends to happen with time. Asterisk. David chuckled, but there was something contemplative about the way he looked at her. A moment stretched between them, delicate, dangerous. Then, just as quickly, he exhaled and pushed off the shelf. Asterisk, you should get some sleep, kiddo. Lena's stomach twisted at the word. Kiddo. It felt wrong, out of place, like something he had forced himself to say. She nodded anyway. Yeah, you too. David hesitated for half a second longer before stepping toward the door. Lena should have let him go, should have let the moment pass. Instead, just as he reached for the handle, she said his name. David. He stopped, turned. Their eyes met, the air between them impossibly still. She didn't know what she wanted to say, didn't know what she was hoping for, but she knew, without a doubt, that after tonight, nothing would be the same. The days after that night carried a strange weight. Lena told herself she had imagined it. The shift in the air, the way David had looked at her before he left her room. But she couldn't unhear the quiet hesitations in his voice, or unsee the flicker of something restrained in his expression. And now, something between them had changed. It was in the smallest details. The way their eyes met across the dinner table a beat too long. How his touch lingered an extra second when handing her a glass. The silence that felt heavier whenever they were alone. Lena wasn't naive. She knew what these moments meant. But she also knew the line between them was razor thin, and crossing it would unravel everything. Still, the pull was undeniable. One evening, she found herself in the kitchen, standing barefoot against the cool tile floor. The house was quiet again, her mother gone for another late-night meeting. She reached for a glass of water, just as David walked in. She hadn't expected him. Her breath hitched at the sight of him, shirtless, damp with sweat from a workout, his hair slightly tousled. The sight shouldn't have affected her, but it did. Asterisk, couldn't sleep? Asterisk, his voice was casual, but there was something knowing beneath it. Lena shook her head. Asterisk, you? Asterisk. He grabbed a water bottle from the fridge, twisting the cap off. Asterisk, not really. Asterisk. For a moment, silence stretched between them, thick and charged. The only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator and the rhythmic drip of water from the faucet. She should have left. She should have walked away before the moment could deepen, before the atmosphere could shift any further. But she didn't. You work out late, she said, just to fill the space. David smirked slightly. Asterisk, it helps clear my head. Asterisk. Lena leaned against the counter, watching him. She noticed the way his muscles tensed as he took a sip of water, the way his gaze flickered toward her before quickly shifting away. Asterisk, and does it work? Asterisk, she asked. David exhaled a quiet chuckle, running a hand through his damp hair. Asterisk, sometimes. Asterisk. Lena didn't know if it was the low lighting, the stillness of the house, or the fact that she had spent too many nights thinking about this exact moment. But suddenly, it felt inevitable. She took a slow step forward, not enough to be obvious, but enough that she was close enough to feel the warmth of his skin. David stilled. He didn't move away. Her pulse pounded as she reached out, just slightly, fingertips grazing his wrist. It was the barest touch, but it sent a shock through her, through him. His breath caught. For a second, neither of them moved. Then, as if realizing the weight of what was happening, David stepped back, breaking the contact. His jaw was tight, his expression unreadable. Lena, she swallowed hard, forcing herself to meet his gaze. I know, she whispered. She didn't need to say more. David clenched his jaw, exhaling through his nose. He looked torn, like a man at war with himself. And then, without another word, he turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving her standing there, heart pounding, hands trembling. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. The storm returned the following night, rain hammering against the windows. Lena sat curled up on the couch in the dimly lit living room, watching the flickering glow of the fireplace. She hadn't expected David to join her. Yet, there he was, standing in the doorway, hesitation written in every line of his posture. Asterisk, couldn't sleep? Asterisk, she asked, mirroring his words from the night before. A small smile tugged at the corner of his lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. Asterisk, yeah. Asterisk. This time, when he sat beside her, the space between them was smaller. This time, neither of them pretended it was normal. I don't know what to do, he admitted, his voice quieter than the rain outside. Lena turned her head to look at him. The firelight flickered against his face, casting shadows that softened the sharp angles of his jaw. Then don't think about it, she whispered. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then, in one slow, inevitable motion, he reached up, his fingers ghosting along her jawline, his thumb brushing over her cheek. A shiver ran down her spine. She should have stopped him. She should have pulled away. But when his lips finally met hers, she didn't. The kiss was slow at first, tentative, as if they were testing the reality of it. But the restraint didn't last. David deepened it, his hands moving to cradle the back of her head, pulling her closer. Lena melted into him, her fingers gripping his shirt as though anchoring herself to the moment. The crackle of the fire, the distant roll of thunder, the sharp inhale of breath between kisses, everything blurred into a haze of warmth and longing. And, just like that, the line they had tried so hard to maintain was gone. The next morning, everything felt different. Lena lay awake in bed, the weight of last night pressing against her chest. The memory of David's hands, his mouth, the heat between them, it all clung to her like a second skin. Yet, as intoxicating as the night had been, morning brought a sharper reality. She wasn't naive. What they had done wasn't just reckless, it was irreversible. A soft knock at her door startled her. She sat up just as it cracked open, and David stepped inside. He was already dressed, his expression guarded. "We need to talk," he said quietly. Lena swallowed, nodding as she pulled the blanket tighter around herself. David hesitated before sitting on the edge of her bed, rubbing his hands together as if trying to warm them. "What happened last night?" he exhaled, shaking his head. Asterisk, it shouldn't have happened. Asterisk, her stomach twisted. She had expected this. Of course she had, but hearing it still stung. Asterisk, do you regret it? Asterisk, her voice was quieter than she intended. David lifted his gaze to hers, and for a brief moment, the mask slipped. She saw it. Conflict, longing, something deeper than he wanted to admit. "No," he said finally. Asterisk, but that doesn't mean it was right. Asterisk. Lena bit her lip, her fingers tightening around the sheets. "I don't care if it was right," she whispered. David sighed, raking a hand through his hair. Asterisk, Lena, this isn't a game. Your mother. Asterisk, he stopped himself, pressing his lips into a thin line. Of course. Her mother. The reminder felt like a slap. Lena forced herself to look away. "I know," she said, though the words felt hollow. David stood abruptly, as if putting space between them would make this easier. Asterisk, we can't do this again. Asterisk, his voice was firm, as if saying it out loud would make it true. But Lena wasn't sure she believed him. Neither of them moved as silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Then, without another word, David turned and left the room, closing the door softly behind him. Lena stared after him, knowing that what had just happened wasn't the end. Not even close. Days passed. David kept his distance, but his avoidance only made things worse. The tension between them was unbearable. Every glance, every accidental touch, every unspoken word hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. Lena tried to push it down, to pretend that nothing had changed, but everything had. And then, her mother decided to leave for the weekend. "I have meetings in Chicago," she said over breakfast, barely looking up from her phone. Asterisk, I'll be back Sunday night. Asterisk, Lena didn't trust herself to look at David. Okay, was all she managed. That night, the house was eerily quiet. Lena lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to ignore the pull in her chest. She knew where he was. Knew he was probably sitting in the living room with a drink in his hand, pretending nothing was wrong. She didn't remember making the decision to get up, only that one moment she was under the covers, and the next she was standing outside his door. She knocked once. A beat of silence. Then the door opened. David stood there, looking at her as if he had been expecting this. Expecting her. Neither of them spoke. She stepped inside. The door clicked shut behind her. And this time, he didn't stop her. The morning after, Lena woke tangled in unfamiliar sheets, the scent of him wrapped around her. She turned over, expecting to find him beside her, but the space was empty. Panic prickled at her skin. She sat up, pulling the covers around her, listening. The house was silent, but she knew he was still here. Slowly, she slipped out of bed, her heart pounding as she stepped into the hallway. She found him in the kitchen, standing at the sink, his hands braced against the counter. Asterisk, David? Asterisk, her voice was soft, uncertain. He didn't turn around. We need to stop, he said, his voice tight. Lena swallowed. Asterisk, you said that last time. Asterisk. He exhaled sharply, finally turning to face her. Asterisk, this time I mean it. Asterisk. She crossed her arms, trying to steady herself. Asterisk, why? Because you feel guilty? Because you love her? Asterisk. His jaw clenched. Asterisk. Because this will destroy everything. Asterisk. Lena shook her head. Asterisk. It's already destroyed. Asterisk. David looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw it. The truth neither of them wanted to admit. He wanted her, but he couldn't have her. Not like this. She'll be home tonight, he said finally, his voice quieter now. Lena nodded, feeling the weight of the words between them. Asterisk, and after that? Asterisk, she asked. David didn't answer, because they both knew this wasn't over. Not even close.